Lumix just announced their first Micro Four Third cameras with phase detect autofocus, the Lumix G9 Mark II. Now, if you've been around this channel for long enough, you knew that I was a big Lumix G9 shooter. There's tons of videos on my channel talking about the G9 and a bunch of different content about that camera. So this new camera coming out gets me really excited. Now, Lumix will be sending me this camera pretty soon to do an in-depth review, talk about different points, actually have the camera, test it out, and do some comparisons with other cameras of mine pretty soon. But just right now, I want to dive into a couple video specs, a couple of my thoughts about this new camera, and what I'm really excited about going forward in the future with Lumix system. Now, getting right into the video specs, it's basically just the GH6 video specs, but in a G9 Mark II body. Now, this body is actually the exact same body as the S5 II. So if you have S5 II cages like from Small Rig, this should theoretically work with the G9 Mark II. Now, in terms of video specs, the only real limitation for this camera is there's no inactive cooling system. So with that said, if you're shooting outdoors in the direct sun for long periods of time, your camera is more likely to heat up. Now, the reason they didn't put a fan in top of the viewfinder area like they did on the S5 II and IIX is mostly because of the 7.5 axis stabilization that they put into this camera. With that said though, you can still get a ton of different things. If your main thing is for social media, this camera is going to be definitely for you, which that leads me on to my next point, who this camera was actually designed for. Now, the G9 Mark II is definitely meant for the photographer first industry with tons and tons of great photo features and capabilities built into this camera, and being mainly a photo first camera, but with basically all the video specs the GH6 has. With that said though, if you do plan to buy this camera instead of the GH6 because of the new phase detect autofocus, you will and potentially run into the issue of overheating the camera if you're planning to record for long periods of time. Now, being a photographer first camera, if you shoot mainly social media content for videos and you're not getting to giant video productions and commercials for businesses and it's more short form content, you can definitely use this as your main video camera. Or if you're in a YouTube scenario similar to this one, this is also definitely a great option for YouTube, especially when you have a little bit more control of the temperature in the room. Now, with all that said, what does this new phase detect autofocus mean for Lumix going forward? The main thing this means is that all future Micro Four Third cameras and cameras coming from Lumix will have phase detect autofocus on that. And that's a big uppercut punch from Lumix to Sony and Canon and all these other camera brands. Having phase detect autofocus, having open gate, having a ton of video centric features for filmmakers, and then also amazing photography capabilities that are coming out of this camera really is pitting Lumix on sort of the forefront of new features and new capabilities with cameras. Now, one thing that is really special and unique about Micro Four Third cameras specifically is that the company Lumix themselves are able to put more jam-packed features because of the smaller sensor in that camera, meaning theoretically they should be slowly starting to go ahead in video specs and just general overall features faster than full frame cameras in their Micro Four Third bodies. The GH6 Mark II could potentially have phase detect autofocus, but it can also probably have 6K open gate 60 frames a second, or potentially even 6K 120 frames a second. Who knows with what the new capabilities of that, but with the smaller sensor definitely means more features. Now, why should you purchase this camera? I honestly might say hold off on this camera if you're not a photographer first enthusiast. Lumix will definitely be releasing probably the GH6 Mark II with phase detect autofocus, or potentially even the GH7 with a phase detect autofocus if you want a Micro Four Third camera with phase detect. But if you're definitely just into the photography world, or you're into social media videos, or just simply YouTube videos, definitely worth purchasing the G9 Mark II with the great video specs that this camera is able to have. being able to have 7.5 axis stabilization, it's definitely going to be a great overall camera. Again, the only limitation being just the potential overheating. And lastly, what should we expect from Lumix going forward? Obviously, face detect is going to be in all of their cameras. And sort of like I mentioned earlier, the GH6 Mark II or the GH7 will definitely be the next heavy hitter for Lumix, having a video first camera with face detect autofocus in the Micro Four Third world. It's definitely a big bummer that the GH6 didn't have this face detect autofocus, but knowing myself, if they come out with a GH6 Mark II or even a GH7 that has similar video features and face detect, that definitely will make basically sort of the GH6 kind of a useless camera and not worth buying, because it makes way more sense to buy a camera with face detect autofocus than a camera without. So going forward, Lumix is definitely going to keep improving their autofocus and different things like that. But they're also kind of taking the forefront seat on what it looks like to have a social media specific camera, something that's dedicated for YouTube, for filmmakers, and just for anyone that needs to have content in multiple formats. Like you're seeing right now, I'm actually filming on the S5 IIX in a 3x2 format, meaning I can crop for vertical or crop for horizontal for YouTube. That's definitely a new feature that more and more filmmakers are wanting, especially when their clients or just themselves want to make videos for YouTube and also make videos for Instagram, Reels, and just different formats and verticals. Now, let me know what your guys' thoughts in the comments below on what you think about the G9 Mark II. If you're interested in seeing a video on why I recommend Lumix so much, you can check out that video right there. Until next week, guys, peace.